Hey everyone, it's Mita here. Today I want to answer your questions about how I ended up at a Caribbean med school. So, the first thing I want to answer is what I did my undergrad in. I went to the University of Toronto and I did my undergrad specializing in neuroscience, and then I applied to American and Canadian medical schools. I applied to 6 in the States and 5 in Ontario. I know in hindsight that might not be a lot of schools to apply to, but at the time I thought that was enough. And I got 0 interviews. When I was applying, I had an MCAT score of 515, and a lot of you had been asking what my score was. So to break it down, I had a 129 in the chemical and physical section, a 130 in the cars, a 129 in the bio section, and a 127 in the psych and social section. So an MCAT score of 515, and my GPA on the AMCAS application, it was a 3.32 in the biochem, physics, and math section, a 3.91 in the all other section, so my total was a 3.46. After getting all of those rejection letters and 0 interviews, it was around February of my final year of undergrad when I decided I needed to look into options abroad. I had a lot to consider, whether I wanted to do a master's program, whether I wanted to take a year off and reapply using my senior year scores, which were a lot better than the rest of my years. First year, second year of undergrad was a lot, and it was an adjustment, so my grades did suffer a little bit. Or I could go abroad and start right away. And I always knew that I wanted to start medical school. I did not want to wait. I was not interested in doing a master's program. I was not interested in taking a year off and just waiting for a school to accept me. I knew that I was capable of learning the material, so I looked into Caribbean med schools. I know that there's a lot of stigma around Caribbean med schools, and to be honest, I was one of those people in undergrad. Someone had told me, oh, Caribbean med schools are horrible, and I was like, yeah, nobody go to a Caribbean med school. That's a horrible idea. Nobody gets residencies. Like, you can't do anything from there. I was one of those people. And so when I was doing my research, I was very skeptical, which meant I researched a lot into them. I wanted to make sure that I was making the right decision. The first step was narrowing down what schools I wanted to apply to. And the main thing I recommend is applying to the Big Four. If you don't know what the Big Four are, they are the 4 schools that are accredited in the United States. They are accredited in Canada, and internationally they're very well known in Caribbean schools. The Big Four are St. George's University, Ross University, AUC, which is the American University of the Caribbean, and SEBA. I narrowed down my decision to those 4 big schools in the Caribbean. From there, I had a lot of research to do because picking between 4 schools is still difficult. How I broke it down was this. I spoke with students who had gone there, so I attended their information sessions. They held a bunch in Toronto, like I think once or twice a year. They have information sessions where the admissions committee and the financial office and some of the alumni will come and share their stories, share their experiences, talk to you, and answer your questions. That was by far the most valuable thing I did, because you can go online and people can tell you, don't go here, it's a bad idea, but until you actually talk to someone who has been through the system, who has graduated, who has landed a residency, is now working in Canada, which I know a lot of you have been asking about, until you do all of those things, it's hard to be certain in your decision. So if you haven't done so already, and if you're interested in going to a Caribbean med school, I highly recommend looking on their website and seeing when they have an info session in your area. They have a lot in many of the big cities, so be sure to check those out. Now that I've talked to people and asked about their experiences, I asked about how their living condition was, how the program was, how clinicals were, and if they ultimately ended up where they wanted to be, and what challenges they faced getting there. Once those questions were answered, I was better able to sit down and decide what school was right for me. So I determined that all 4 schools were credible, all 4 schools had successful students, and I had no worries or red flags in that sense. Then it became all about class size. So one way to differentiate the 4 schools is your class size. I went to a large university. So in my undergrad class at U of T, my first 2 years, our classes were anywhere between 1,000 to 2,000 people. So I'm used to big lecture halls. I'm used to a lot of students. I'm not really looking into having one-on-one time with my professor. I don't necessarily find that valuable for me. I want them to be available if I have questions, either through email or office hours, but I don't need them to notice me being in class or not. That's just me. So between the 4, Ross and St. George's had large class sizes versus SEBA and AUC had smaller class sizes in comparison. So I categorized them that way. Then it became about financial aid. Caribbean med schools are not cheap. at least not the big four. You can look online to look at their tuitions because they do change, but generally the two bigger schools with larger class sizes are a little bit more expensive than AUC and SEBA. Another very important thing to consider, at least for me, was flying, because when you're on an island and you're feeling homesick, you want to be able to easily go home and come back without it really affecting your study schedule. I thought that was a very key thing to consider. I was fortunate enough that I have direct flights from Toronto straight to Grenada, and they're only like 5.5 hours long, and the flights are not that expensive, considering. That was one thing that really put St. George's above the others. AUC also had direct flights. SEBA would take 2 flights minimum, and Ross, I believe, would also take 2 flights minimum. And so I put a little check mark in the categories whether there was a direct flight available for me or not. Another important thing was clinical rotation locations. So when you're considering where you want to go in your 3rd and 4th year of clinical rotations, some schools have the option of the United States, some schools have Canada options as well, and UK options. So you have to look because they're constantly changing, and I don't want to give you any wrong information. But on their website, they will list what their clinical rotation locations are and their hospital affiliations. I decided to go with a school that had the most opportunities available. That way I knew that I wouldn't have any problems with my clinical rotations. I also wanted to make sure that it was streamlined so that all my rotations could be in the same city without me having to move around between different rotations. And then in the end, it just became about reputation, I guess. I knew people personally who had gone to both schools who had landed residencies that they hoped for, even competitive residencies. In the end, I ended up choosing Grenada, mainly because of the direct flight, and that just ended up working out for me. I'm really happy that I ended up making this choice. So in summary, I ended up choosing St. George's University because of the resources available. They're a very large school and will have a lot of resources. They have direct flights available from Toronto straight to Grenada, which is a lifesaver for me because I can go home when I want to. And they also have clinical rotations in locations that I'm interested in. So a lot of it is in upstate New York, New Jersey, but they also have California. They also have affiliations with some Canadian hospitals, so I could go back and do some of my electives in 4th year back in Canada. And they also had UK options. So in case I wanted to try a new experience and learn about a different healthcare system, I had that option as well. And I liked having those options available to me. And so I ended up at SGU. I hope that answers your questions about why I chose a Caribbean med school. It wasn't my first choice, of course. I did apply to Canada. I did apply to the States. I got 0 interviews, and I did not want to wait. That was the main thing. And for me, my time was more valuable. It was not a rushed decision. I just wanted to continue with my life, continue my education, and not have a gap year. And that was just a personal choice. All right, well, I hope this was helpful. I hope this answered your questions about why I chose a Caribbean med school and why I chose St. George's in particular. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'll be continuing with these series about Caribbean med schools and posting new videos about it. So subscribe if you want to continue learning more, and I'll see you next time.